Writing deep stories requires for me to write from a dark philosophy perspective, because for me, you could get a lot of wisdom from dark philosophy, because a lot of the times that's where all the truth is hidden, because people tend to hide all of their shadows, all of their creatures, all of the gunk and grimy things. They like to hide it and they shove it in the darkness. And in order to get enlightenment, I find that you have to oftentimes go down the dark path to seek truth. Now, I talk about this a lot on my channel, and I had gotten a comment where somebody had mentioned Carl Jung. Now, I didn't know who Carl Jung was, but I have been doing a deep dive, and I guess I can see where what I'm talking about is very similar to Carl Jung, because Carl Jung, if I'm not mistaken, coined the word shadow work, and he talks a lot about going deep within his soul and going down that dark path to get enlightenment, basically. And he was around during like 1913, 1914, when he written this book called, well, I don't think he titled it the Red Book, but when people found the book, it was red, so they call it the Red Book. And in that book, he speaks a lot about his journey into his soul and discovering things from a spiritual perspective, because he was very like logical, and he hung with a lot of scientists and stuff like that. So to speak from a spiritual perspective, um he was called a mystique by his peers, and that's really like, that's not a good thing to be called in the science circle. But I can see where what I'm talking about is very similar to Carl Jung, because of the going into the depths and getting wisdom from that, right? So, in this video, I want to talk about where I get my inspiration from. Carl Jung, now he's going to be one of those people. But before him, because I just discovered him, um, I've gotten a lot of my inspiration, one from myself, because I'm always in deep thought. Um, then I came across Napoleon Hill with Outwitting the Devil, which brought me deeper into things. And then I came across someone like Anne Rice, and I felt really connected with her books, like The Vampire Lestat, and how metaphorically, because he was a vampire, he was always in darkness, he was always thinking and in deep thought and questioning life and certain things. And that's me all the time. So I resonated a lot with her work. And because of that, I liked how her work, it was like she was spitting a lot of philosophy, and she made it into a paranormal like story. And I like paranormal stuff, like stories. I like fantasy fiction work. I like erotica books, urban fiction. Um, but I don't like how the stories in urban fiction, I don't like how the plots are. Basically, like where I'm from, these books, they talk a lot about getting with like thugs and stuff like that, and a lot of violence and a lot of sex and blah blah blah, and just getting caught up in that world. And I don't like reading stuff like that, because that gets into the subconscious. And this is why, not to go into this, but the Black community, I'm mixed, but you know, in general, the Black community is the way that it is. Not majority of it, but the chunk that's really loud. That's why it is the way that it is, because of the books that the girls are reading and the what is being played in the music about drugs, sex, violence, all that stuff. Um, but I do like the erotica stuff that's in these urban fiction books. So I took from different sections of different writings and I came up with my own dark, esoteric, urban fiction kind of style of writing. Um, and there's another source that I pulled from, and it reminds me of Carl Jung. Now, Carl Jung, what he came across was nothing new, but the way he phrased certain words, like the collective unconscious and stuff like that, I really like how he broke it down. Um, However, what he came across was nothing new. Now, I'm a spiritual person. I don't really dabble into like deities and stuff like that, but there's two female deities that I like. One is Lilith, of course. She's like the mother, right? But there's another deity that I really like. And this is where I get a lot of my dark philosophy from. And this deity is from the Mesopotamia, Sumeria region. And her name is Ereshkigal. And what drew me to this deity is that Ereshkigal is the ruler of the underworld. She, like that, she is the law. She is the end all be all. She resides in the underworld. And in the Sumerian mythology, she's the only goddess that has to stay in her realm. While all her family gods and goddesses um, are up in the sky, having dinner parties and stuff like that, gatherings, she's the only one that can't go. She has to stay where she's at. And what's so deep about that is she basically she basically is the ruler of the dead. She is the truth. She is something that people escape from because we are all going to go to that same fate. We're all going to eventually cross over. A lot of people tend to escape from that, but she is the truth. She is what everybody's going to see, basically. And she represents what people tend to hide. And the thing is, so in the Sumerian mythology, she has a sister named Inanna. And Inanna, if I'm not mistaken, she's the goddess of heaven and earth. Now, a lot of women in the spiritual community, they love her because she represents like sex and femininity and all that stuff, right? All the glitz and glamour, of course. Ereshkigal, she's not that known, but best believe when she becomes sexualized, she's going to be a thing. Um, with the story of these two sisters, so there's different ways of how this story goes, but basically there's a story where Inanna descends to the underworld. Now, in one version, she goes down there because she's attending a funeral of Ereshkigal's husband, and it was her fault of how her husband died anyway because she didn't get what she wanted. She basically, I believe, she wanted to get with this god. This god turned her down. She made Ereshkigal's husband fight for her, and he died during battle. Now, I thought I heard something. Now, She goes down there to attend the funeral. Rescue girl's pissed off because, first of all, anyone who goes down there, they cannot return. They cannot go back to the earth. That's the rule. Now, Inanna, she feels like she could get away with things. So, in another version, though, Inanna feels like she can rule not just the earth and the heaven, but the underworld as well. So she tries to do like this whole power takeover. Either way, she descends, and Ereshkigal, at each gate, because there's 7 gates. So at each gate, Inanna had to remove something from her, like a necklace or whatever. By the time she meets her sister, she's butt naked. Ereshkigal immediately has her killed and hung, and Inanna, she knew this was going to happen, and she had one of her helpers like help her escape. So she was down there dead for like 3 days, and she resurrected. And they say this is where they got the story from for Jesus, but that's another topic. She ends up escaping, and to me that represents a lot, because this is what people do. They try to get out of things. They try to escape what they've done. They try to escape their shadows. When Inanna returned, she was able to live her glamorous life. However, Ereshkigal, she stays in that depths. She remembers everything. Nothing escapes. She knows the truth of it all. And to sum that up, because of her story and how she stays in that depths, that's where I get a lot of my dark philosophy from. When I write from that depths. There's no escaping. So the people who read my book so far, because I've written a darker version of a Cinderella story. I have a part 2 coming out. I'm writing another book. So I have a lot going on. So for the people who read my first book, they really enjoyed it, and they really want to pick my brain of what I meant by certain things. And the reason why I think I did a really good job with that, and how I was able to get people to like think, is because I written from that depths. People like to escape from their shadows, and I brought it out in my writing. So with Carl Jung, his work reminded me of Ereshkigal, of being in that depths and getting the truth out of things and no escaping from it. So yeah, I'm gonna study Carl Jung's work more, but that's where I get a lot of my inspiration from people like Anne Rice, Napoleon Hill with The Outwitted Devil, and Ereshkigal, and I put it all into my writing. So if you're somebody who is trying to write deep bodies of work and you want to leave an impact, not something that you just put out there, make a quick buck, like you really want to put yourself out in the world, like, I'm an author, this is what I do, I'm serious about my shit, basically, right? You gotta pull from certain things. And for me, it's dark philosophy, because there's a lot of like deep wisdom in that. And I love how I was able to make people broaden their minds and really think and open up. So yeah, that's all I have for this video. Pull from these sources and write from the heart, and your work will be good. I promise.